everyone, wherever you're based today, as once again we have an international audience for today's Bright Talk webinar on immersion cooling, monitoring and control made easy, brought to you by AIM. My name's Steve Ackland, I'm CEO of AIM. Thank you very much indeed for attending. So for the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to explain the concept of immersion cooling, monitoring and control, and why data centers are moving in that direction. Immersion or liquid cooling is already revolutionising data center design, of course, and providing cooling efficiency, extended hardware lifespan, and unprecedented equipment density are all huge benefits. But to monitor an estate at scale as a single pane of glass, particularly where a data center is a hybrid one, immersion, liquid cooled, air cooled, that's a complex process which requires some smart software. But of course, monitoring the estate is only part of the story. Artificial intelligence, so AI, as we well know, learning systems have a major role to play in helping to streamline this complexity. And if machine learning capabilities added into monitoring software, which can anticipate issues and correct them by automation before they become problems or system failures, then you have the ideal observability and remediation solution. AIM's DataServe software platform has been designed to provide exactly this ideal solution. Through innovative AI-led technology with focus on asset service management and resource optimization, often known as AI Ops. And you'll hear a lot more about that very shortly. So I'm joined today by my AIM colleague, Matt Smith. Matt is AIM's DataServe product manager and will be delivering the webinar shortly. Now, please feel free to raise any questions you might have through the session, and my team and I will be checking during the next 45 minutes or so. And if you do wish to raise a question, obviously, please do so using the Bright Talk question section. And time allowing, we'll raise and answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. Finally, as a subscriber to Bright Talk, you'll receive a link to the recording after the webinar if you want to watch it on demand. Do make sure that you look out for future AIM webinars on a range of interesting, contemporary and leading issues in the use of new technologies. So without further ado, I now invite Matt to step forward to proceed with the webinar. And Matt, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve, and hello, everybody. I'm just going to bring up our agenda slide here. So we have a few slides to get through first, but then I will actually be showing you the system. I'll give you a quick demonstration of DataServe shortly. So yes, first bit, what is DataServe? It's a good question, and actually, depending on the customer, it can have lots of different answers to the same question. DataServe essentially is an application that allows you to build your own application in a no-code fashion. So we have loads of drag and drop builders and wizards that allow you to do that. But of course, I'll be focusing on sort of the context of immersion cooling in this webinar. So we'll cover off what is DataServe. Importantly, of course, how does it work? I don't want to throw you in at the deep end, show you the system straight away. I will show you a couple of slides just explaining how it does what it does. There will also be some flow diagrams and sort of like a little visual video as well that you can have a look at that helps me explain how DataServe does what it does. And then sort of the second half of the webinar, we'll focus on the demonstration. So I will log into DataServe, have a chat with the virtual agent, and do a few little searches through its neural network and explain how its brain works and how, if you're using it in the immersion cooling context, how does it look and feel as a user using the application. And then finally, talk about next steps. If you're interested in learning more about DataServe and what we do, how to get in touch. But as Steve said as well, we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So please do fire your questions at Steve and we'll field them at the end. So moving on, there is a question here that actually isn't in the agenda, and this is on purpose because I don't want the sort of primary part of this to be what is immersion cooling. I'm sort of taking it as granted that because you're attending this webinar, you do have some understanding of what immersion cooling is. But just in case you stumbled across this, and you think that sounds really cool, like I did when I first learned about immersion cooling, I will give you a couple of sentences now. Essentially, you can imagine a very large tank that's full of coolant, and that coolant gets cooled somehow. And then within that tank sit your servers, your very power-hungry hot servers with CPUs and GPUs going up into the hundreds of watts each. And all of that coolant, therefore, cools your servers down. And of course, it's non-electrically conductive, which is what a lot of people ask me. Isn't it just going to fry the servers? The answer is no, of course not. That would be silly. It's non-electrically conductive. But the first real part then of this is, well, what is DataServe? Now we've got sort of the immersion cooling bit out the way. What exactly is DataServe? So I've got a little pie chart here. As I said at the start, it's a hard question to answer because depending on customer, depending on industry, depending on use case, it can be lots of different things. But as product owner, I do try and boil things down to my first interaction with a customer when it comes to what DataServe is, because I can't just say it does everything. I hate it when product owners give me that answer. So these are the sort of the three things that I'd like to highlight before we begin. So DataServe is an automation builder and monitoring engine. So that's one thing. It's also a self-service portal. So some customers have this as their front ends to various service management systems. We've all used portals in the past, I'm sure, where you have to, if you've got an IT issue, you have to get in touch with the IT team. You're told, don't call us, don't email us, go to our portal. So it's like a no-code portal builder. But also it's a virtual agent, and it's got some really clever features in terms of the virtual agent capability. It's even got an integration with ChatGPT, and I'll be showing you a little bit of that later. So it sort of gives it that personal touch, and it really helps to drive up adoption, because when people are looking into implementing DataServe, we're always looking for ways to drive up adoption from day one, and virtual agents are a great way of doing that. So the reason why that little slice of the pie at the top right is sort of away from the others is because that's actually our focus for today's session. I'll be walking you through how exactly we build in these no-code automations and monitoring, so that we can look at whatever assets it is and whatever sensors we want to monitor, and then how do we build in also like the corrective and preventative action steps that we want to do going forwards. So that's the focus of today's webinar. However, we will naturally, because we are in DataServe and showing you these things, we will naturally come across the virtual agent, and we will naturally come across its self-service portal capabilities. Now, this is what it looks like on my very purple iMac there on the left-hand side. You will notice we've got the AIM branding there. So Steve did mention this, but we're from a company called AIM, and we are the creators of DataServe. We built it from the ground up, and that's why this screenshot looks in the AIM branding. But just to note that wherever you see DataServe in different organizations, it always looks different, because the pages are built differently, the branding is different, you've got different icons and different logos. So just to point out there that we do also have this no-code branding builder. And I've said no-code a few times, and when it comes to the demonstration that I'm going to be showing you today, I haven't had to touch a single line of code, and in fact, I'm actually not a developer myself, even though I'd like to be. My sort of skill set is around sort of a business analyst skill set, really, when it comes to software. And the reason why I wanted to mention this is that whenever I'm looking at software myself, I always ask myself, how easy would it be to administer this? How easy would it be to set this up? And so that's why I think it's always important to mention that it is no code. So everything you'll see today is all done with our drag and drop builders. And actually, when it comes to the demonstration a little bit later on, if we do have the time at the end, I will actually jump into our admin console, so you can have a little look about sort of behind the scenes, how does it work. Now, second bullet point there, cloud or on premises, very flexible when it comes to how this is deployed. Primarily, our customers have it on our AIM cloud, which is hosted through Azure. However, particularly when it comes to what we're talking about here in terms of immersion cooling and data centers, it absolutely can be installed on premises as well. It's what we call responsive too. Now, when I first heard the word responsive a fair few years ago, I thought that was referring to, you know, the way in which a virtual agent is responsive. It responds to you. No, in the context of DataServe here, what we mean by responsive is that it's a responsive web application. And that essentially means whether you look at it on your laptop, desktop, tablet, or a mobile phone, as long as you've got a web browser, you can run DataServe, you can use it on those devices. We also support speech to text and text to speech. And this is particularly useful for people with accessibility needs. So perhaps, you know, when it comes to interacting with software, you might struggle to use a keyboard or a mouse due to dexterity issues, or you might be blind and need the application to be sort of essentially read to you. So we're very big on WCAG compliance, which are these guidelines that allow applications to be used by people with accessibility needs. But it's also just good for, you know, on the go. If I want to take out my phone and ask a question to the virtual agent about how my immersion cooling stuff is going, and then you know, the virtual agent can speak back to me and say, Matt, everything's cool. Then that's a nice way of using DataServe. And it's also multilingual. So I always get asked what languages we support, and it is endless. And because I've been watching a lot of Star Trek recently, I do like to say we can support any language you want, including Klingon. So how do we do all of this stuff? I've got a nice little video here that is illustrating the end-to-end process of using DataServe in this.
Hello, Matt. We've lost you. I guess you know that.
Hi, Steve. Just checking you can hear me okay.
Yeah, we can hear you now, but the screen is frozen for a bit by the looks of it.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, sorry. I think we had a bit of an issue with my connection there. But as long as you can hear me okay now, Steve, I will continue from where we were.
Please do.
Thank you. Yep. Okay, so this is a visualization of the end-to-end process of using DataServe in this immersion cooling use case. So at the top left, we've got our tank, and it's full of coolant. It's got our servers in there. It's connected to a cooling distribution unit, making everything nice and cool. Now, what we've then got there at the top left, things like flow rate, leak detection, viscosity, anything that you want to monitor, essentially. As long as there is a sensor that can monitor that, then great, we can feed that information into DataServe. And the reason why this these lines are connecting DataServe up to the top left there, essentially because it's multi-directional, they're bidirectional. It's because we can have that information passed through to DataServe. We can also go off and grab it ourselves. So let's say you've got a database somewhere that you're logging your telemetry details in. Then we can actually poll that every second, or it can be pushed to DataServe every second. And what we then have on the right-hand side there, you can see it says alarms triggered. What we have associated with each of the different assets and sensors are things called healthy ranges. So you can imagine, a nice easy example would be for coolant. There's a range of safe temperatures or healthy temperatures, however you want to call it. What we then have actually in DataServe itself, for those familiar with IT service management, we have something called a CMDB. It stands for Configuration Management Database. That's where all of our configuration items, assets, sensors, they're all kept within DataServe. They each have a record within our CMDB. And associated with those different assets is a range, a healthy range. As soon as it goes above or below, or, whatever that healthy range is, we can have these alarms that are triggered. And they can take many different forms. That could be an email. That could be a push notification to somebody's device. It could even be the DataServe virtual agent starting a conversation with that particular service owner. I'll just press play again, and you'll see down the bottom there, telemetry sensors analysis, and then AI model created. What this bit is about is essentially we're saying here, if an alarm is triggered, then something has happened that potentially we would like to have prevented. Now, it might not necessarily mean that something's broken. If the temperature of the coolant has gone 1 degree, above the healthy range, it might not mean that the pump's broken. It might actually just mean that we need to tell the pump to work a bit harder, or the fans need to spin up, or whatever it might be. But if we actually do say we've got an incident here, and when I say incident, I mean in the true IT service management sense of the term, some sort of loss of service or failure of a component. If we do have an incident that's related to our immersion cooling tech, what DataServe can do is actually look at all the telemetry information that it's captured, possibly from the beginning of time, but actually more like, last 5 minutes, last 10 minutes, whatever it might be. It can sort of depend essentially on the sensor and on the configuration item. But we can create an AI model that essentially says this is what bad looks like. I like to sort of talk about it in those words, because then you can kind of visualize what this AI model is. It sounds quite nebulous. What's an AI model? But if I said, here's a picture of what bad looks like, and if something comes along that looks like that picture, well, you've got a match. It's also important to note as well that the DataServe has an understanding of how components are linked together. Because if a temperature sensor within the coolant reports that actually we're now above the healthy range, it doesn't mean that there's an issue with the coolant, and it doesn't mean there's an issue with the sensor. It actually means that there's potentially an issue with some other thing that's correlated with it. So for example, in this case here, maybe our pump has actually stopped working. The CDU, the cooling distribution unit, there's some sort of issue there, and that's why it's heating up. So the AI model can actually be multifaceted. It's not necessarily just looking at one part of it. It's actually looking at all the data holistically. So that AI model gets created. We can also push corrective action. So as I said earlier, it might just be as simple as making the pumps or the fans spin up. Normally, though, of course, the tank manufacturers have got that type of thing covered. You have sort of fan curves and pump curves depending on the various sensors. But we can push that type of corrective action too. But the main takeaway here, and I'll just let it sort of complete, there we go. The main takeaway here essentially is that when we can map what bad looks like, if that starts happening again at some other point, perhaps we can actually prevent it. So instead of our servers shutting down or whatever issue we might encounter, we might actually prevent it from happening. So we had that concept introduced there of the healthy range. We also covered off AI model creation. However, you might say to me, well, Matt, that's all well and good. You know, let's say a pump starts behaving badly. It starts breaking, starts causing issues with our immersion cooling tech for whatever reason. That's great for preventing it from happening in the future, but actually, I want to prevent the first occurrence of that thing happening. Well, this is where it comes to pre-trained models. And so, you know, let's say you're a tank manufacturer and you've actually already got a load of great telemetry data, some of which might include some issues to do with failures. Brilliant. We can actually ingest that information and train our models. We can also take in synthetic data. So you might know, as an expert in the field, about how your tech works. You might know what bad looks like, even though it might never have happened. You might be able to actually map it out. And it's essentially as easy as putting together a spreadsheet of telemetry information, feeding it into DataServe, and it trains itself on that data. So if bad happens, how can we prevent it from happening again? But actually, if we can model it before it happens, then even better. And it might be a case of sending an email to somebody, raising a ticket in an IT service management somewhere to say, we need to get this fan changed, this pump updated before it fails, essentially. And the next 3 slides that you've got here are flow diagrams that basically go through everything I've just said. And because they're self-explanatory and I've kind of already talked about these processes already, I won't spend too long talking about them. But yeah, essentially, if you're watching this on demand, you can pause it and digest the information at your leisure. But actually, we'll also send this out to you guys as well who are watching live, so you can look at this in a bit more detail later. But this is how the healthy range process works. This is where the asset fails and how we train models. And then the third one is where the AI model can be created prior to failure, what we call pre-trained, to prevent that failure from happening in the first place. This is also a screenshot from one of our data sheets, and it just essentially goes through what our AI ops strategy is for immersion cooling. It's kind of one screen that tells you everything I've just said in the past 10 minutes or so. So again, it's something you can pause and read at your own leisure if you wish. Okay. So moving on to the demonstration. These are the things that I will show you and cover off. So I'll start off with an overview. What I like to do when I'm demonstrating software, particularly for people who might not have ever seen DataServe before, is actually just go right from the top and scroll down slowly. So you can kind of just digest everything there without me speaking too much. Hi guys, apologies. I think I may have lost you then again. Steve?
Yes, you did. Yes, just for a couple of seconds though.
Seemed
you were getting ready to prepare for the demonstration anyway.
Yes, apologies guys, my just sort of popped off there, but glad you can hear me again. Okay, so yes, demonstration. I will scroll down slowly from top to bottom, just so you can see all the different components that are in there. Yeah, without me sort of again throwing you in at the deep end, and then we'll start doing some really cool stuff with it. So I will ask a question to the virtual agent, and what we'll have is whenever you type anything to DataServe, it will search across DataServe's neural network, and funnily enough, actually, I'll show you that right at the end, so you can visualize DataServe's neural network. And it will try and match it against certain intents. Now, intents are probably familiar to any of you that have come across sort of AI models and virtual agents in the past. But essentially, it's like understanding what the user is saying. So if I type in XYZ, DataServe, because it matches a certain intent, knows what to do next. And what's also quite important, I think, when I'm giving you this demonstration is to consider how some of the things we're talking about would be automated, and some of the things might be manual. Now, what I'm going to be doing, because this is a demonstration, I'm not actually making some immersion tech fail that's sitting next to me and that triggering off. I am triggering these things manually for the sake of demonstration. But of course, these are really realistically things that you're going to want to have automated in the background. So when I am doing anything manual, I will sort of point out that actually, you know, in real life, it's a little bit different and it'll be automated. So yes, we'll have a virtual agent conversation and we'll trigger one of our healthy range alarms. And we'll also talk through the process of then doing some sort of corrective action. And then the second part of that is around the AI model match. So this is where we're then doing some preventative maintenance, because we've already modeled what bad looks like, and therefore we've seen that bad might be happening again. So that's what that AI model match bit is about. Now, going down to that third major bullet point, we've got the ChatGPT connector. So I'll introduce this again when I get to that part of the demonstration. But I'm sure you've all been playing around with ChatGPT. I think everyone has for the past, year or so. We've been involved in this type of tech ever since GPT-3 was introduced. So that was probably 2 or 3 years ago now that we've been integrating with that. But just to explain what it is, it's a large language model that you can ask questions of. And a lot of people, as I said, been playing around with it in the background. However, what we do is not really ask questions of its own large language model, but we actually feed it data that's to do with the service environment that DataServe sits in, and it answers questions in that context. So to give you an example, if I work for a bank and I've got a question about my paternity leave, and I say, how much paternity leave am I entitled to? I don't want to know what the statutory paternity leave is. I actually want to know for my organization what the actual answer to that question is. And so this is how we use ChatGPT. We actually feed it information that is to do with that service environment, and it answers in context. And of course, what I was talking about there is more of a service management context. Maybe that's front-ending an IT service management system, for example. But what we're going to do here is actually look at our telemetry data, maybe get some sort of insight into it. And so I'll ask ChatGPT to actually summarize the telemetry data that we've got to do with a certain sensor. And I'll also ask ChatGPT a couple of questions like, what's the highest temperature? What's the largest temperature increase? That type of thing. And as I said earlier, if we do have time at the end, which I think we will, I'll go into our administration console and I'll show you those 3 things that you see. So our page builder, which is a no-code drag and drop page builder that you can use to do everything that I'm showing you on the screen here. I'll also probably show you our neural network. It's something that doesn't always come across terribly well on screen shares because it's a very complex web of nodes. It's essentially, you know, if you had somebody's brain looking at it from a microscopic point of view, you've got all these different nodes that are interconnected. But I'll show it you very quickly. And then possibly as well our report builder. If I do get cut off again, guys, apologies. I will essentially just reconnect to the old headset again, and hopefully Steve will recognize if I've dropped off. And all I'll do is hopefully come back in 5 or so seconds. Okay, so let's go to the actual system itself. And I'm just going to full screen it. And here we have DataServe. So as promised, I will start at the top and scroll down, and I'll introduce each section of the demonstration before I go into it. So as you can see, we have lots of different types of what we call components on the page here. What we do is support something called socketing, which is a way of building software so that you know, sometimes you might be in a piece of software and you have to refresh the page in order to see something. Well, in DataServe, it sort of knows that there's new information and it presents it to the user automatically. So we've got lots of different types of charts and reports here. And as I said, there's no coding involved in setting this up. It's all been done using our drag and drop wizards and page builders. That's what it looks like. And again, just to say, as I said earlier on, the AIM branding, yeah, no one uses that, of course. Everyone will set DataServe up in their own organization's branding colors and logos. Right, so what I will do is just introduce each of the components to give you a bit of context, and then let's kick off a conversation with our virtual agent. So right at the top right, just next to my face, we have our notification bell. You can see I've got quite a few unread notifications there, 40 or so. What this does is where we have possibly lots of different sensors or lots of different immersion cooling tanks, I might only want to subscribe to the ones that I'm interested in or as a part of my business area, for example. And that's where it's feeding me push notifications that are contextual. You know, if we've got 100 immersion cooling tanks in our data center or whatever, I don't necessarily want to know about everything, only the ones that I'm in charge of, maybe. And so this is what this does. This is feeding me notifications whenever anything goes wrong, any sort of alarms go off, that gets pushed to me. And as I said earlier, they are also supporting as push notifications. So within Windows, you get notifications. On my phone, I'll get a notification as well. And I can give that a click. And I can see that that's the name of the asset, when it was last updated, what the description of the issue is. And you can even see there, it's been reported to the DataServe virtual agent, awaiting confirmation of corrective action. So this is where a healthy alarm has been triggered, a healthy range alarm has been triggered, and the service within DataServe has been updated. So at a glance, I can see that there's some sort of issue there, and it's awaiting some sort of corrective action confirmation. So that's what my notification bell is all about at the top right-hand side of the screen there. Moving down, we have our AI search bar. Now, this, you can kind of think of this as like a Google search bar, but for your own organization. It's not like what I'm going to show you right now isn't necessarily tightly linked to our immersion cooling use cases. But if I just search for something like printer, this is just to show you how it sort of looks and behaves. What we do with DataServe is actually allow you to index data wherever it lives. So we have like SharePoint connectors, Confluence connectors. We integrate with the leading service management systems like Remedy, Remedy4, ServiceNow, all of that good stuff. So that if I have some sort of issue,
Yeah, mate, you've gone again.
I have, and am I back?
You are back.
Thank you, Steve. So in the service management context, we index data wherever it lives, and we can search on it, and we use an AI machine learning model to allow people to get to documents and that type of thing very quickly. But also linked to this is our virtual agent. So if I just click there, you'll see Amy, our virtual agent, pops up. So it's an AI search bar with an integrated virtual agent. Moving down, our service health component shows us at a glance the service health of the various assets and configuration items. And I can have a quick click there. This is that same notification essentially that we saw at the top right. We also essentially the reason why the service health components and also these map components that you see down here, we get asked a lot, well, if we've got 100 devices, how does that look on the screen? You know, if you've only got the one immersion cooling tank with a few servers in, that's quite easy to represent in terms of the user interface. This type of thing here will allow you therefore to really scale up. And so if you do have like hundreds of assets and configuration items that you want to track, this is how you then would do that easily. And it's configurable about how many rows and how many columns you show on here. And you can have as many different maps showing different regions, etc. as you wish. And as I said before, because you can actually subscribe to the various assets that you want to start tracking by clicking on this bell icon, that allows you to really fine tune what notifications you're after. And then moving down, we've got our real-time telemetry information that's being fed through to DataServe, showing lots and lots of different types of telemetry information. So what I'm going to do is within our search bar, I'm going to ask a question. And what this has done, you remember when I searched for printer earlier, it actually came back with a list of articles. Because we've got a match against our neural network for this term, any issues, ? That's why it's automatically started off a chat with our virtual agent. And as I said earlier, this is one of those things where you don't really want to have to come here and manually ask that question, of course. This is just for demonstration purposes. The idea is, of course, that this would be automatically started, you know, just like an email will automatically go out or a notification would automatically go out. This is almost like Amy is giving me a call saying, Matt, we've got some sort of issue. So we've got an issue there. Coolant temperature in tank 1 is above normal thresholds. Shall I increase pump and fan speed in CDU number 1? And I can say yes to that. And this is why you saw that notification that we had earlier, where it said we're awaiting confirmation of corrective action. That's this that we've done now. Now, the thing I wanted to point out is Amy's not just leaving it there now. Amy's saying, okay, that's now been done. So we've sent essentially a request off to increase pump and fan speeds. But that's not the end of the potential issue, of course. We do actually need to track, make sure temperatures return to normal. And if they don't, then Amy will let us know. Now, the next thing that we've got here, you can read on screen. While I've got you, I've noticed the behavior of pump 2 has an 87% match against its potential failure AI model. So this is where we've already created an AI model of what bad looks like for this particular pump. data server has been trained on that data, and because pump 2 is behaving in a way that is above the confidence threshold associated with that AI model, we've now got that pop-up as well. And again, it's not something we'd want to manually ask. We want Amy to essentially give us a call and tell us that we've got this issue, and that's what's happening on screen here. So shall I raise a ticket to get this replaced, yes or no? And I'm going to say yes. As I said, we integrate the leading service management systems, so this will then go off and create a ticket. And you can see there, ticket number 285, assigned to my colleague, Rob Berry. So this is our, essentially, we're preventing an issue from happening before it's happened. So that's what the virtual agent looks like. Moving on then to what we're doing around ChatGPT, the ChatGPT connector. So I'm just going to do a quick search here for the word telemetry. And what I can do is actually view this telemetry data. But as you can see, there's quite a lot of information there. It's not something really I can glean much information from. There's thousands of rows of data here. But what I can do, using the power of AI within our virtual agent, actually get some good information from it. So wherever we see this launch chat icon, that means that Amy is going to be talking in context with us about this particular set of data. So let's click launch chat. And Amy is asking, what would we like to do? First thing I'm going to do is ask for a summary. So I click on summarize. You can see there, we've got what the data is, and a nice summary there, basic summary saying that the temperature raises from around 26 degrees up to around 34 degrees or so. I can also ask any question that I want. So if I click on ask a question, I can say, what's the highest temp? And you can see very quickly, there we go, that's come back. I can also ask another question. So I'm going to say, what's the largest temp increase? There we go. So you can ask any question you want, any sort of summary you want, and that essentially is sending that data off to ChatGPT along with the question, and then it's coming back with the response to that information. Just so you know, we do have two ways of doing it. The first way is going off to the OpenAI API, but also due to security considerations, most of our customers actually use it in their own Azure tenancy. So within their Azure tenancy, you can actually have your own ChatGPT API, and it just means that all the data is kept within your organizational boundaries. And just because we have a couple of minutes or so, I'm going to jump into our admin console just to show you how all of this comes together and how we set it up. This is an example of our homepage builder. This is our drag and drop page layout builder. So on the left-hand side here, these are all of the different types of components that we support. We can drag those onto what we call our canvas over on the right-hand side here. And each of our components has got various bits of config associated with it that allows us to set it up. So that's what our homepage builder looks like. It took me about 10 minutes to get that set up. And as I said, no code there. And then if I just jump quickly into our neural network as well, this is essentially the brain of the virtual agent. It will take a couple of seconds just to load everything in. But when it does, you will see that we've got lots and lots of different nodes that are all connected to one another. And the way we add these nodes into the virtual agent, again, is with a no-code wizard-driven builder. So if I zoom out a little bit here, you'll see loads of different nodes all connected to one another. That's the brain of the virtual agent. And then the final bit, I'm just going to show you our report builder. Let's click edit on one of these. Again, it's a wizard-driven builder here. We've got 3 steps that allows us to generate our reports. And this is one of the report types we have that shows you real-time information, highest and lowest numbers, and everything that you can see in terms of icon and color is all editable. So that's everything from the demonstration. Relatively short and sweet, but of course, if you're interested in finding out more, please do contact us and we can have a more detailed demonstration. And that's really where we come on to our next steps. So if you are, somebody that's using immersion calling and you're after an understanding of what your telemetry data is telling you, and you'd like just to demonstrate data serve in your context, or even if you'd like to have a free trial or a proof of concept setup, then we can do that. But also, if you're in the immersion calling space and maybe you're a tank manufacturer and you want to make sure that your tank and its software can integrate with data serve, because you might have a customer out there that already has data serve, then please do get in touch with us as well. Our details are at the end of the PowerPoint that we have here. And I'll just quickly pass over to Steve to see if we had any questions.
Great, thank you very much, Steve, Matt, and beautifully on time, the 45 minutes or just over. So thanks again for that. And I think just to one point, I'd just like to pick up on so everybody's clear. Obviously, as we know, OpenAI, generative AI, there have been some security concerns from in the press and from various organizations. Just to say 2 things. First of all, the approach we take through APIs makes sure that the use of the software is absolutely 100% foolproof in terms of security. And in fact, for those who are subscribers to our channel, we did a previous webinar on how we've achieved that very, very securely, particularly when you're looking internally at your own data. So feel free to track back, or if you can't find it, then let us know and we'll point you to where that video is. Other than that, we've had clearly you've done a pretty good job, Matt. You've answered most people's points. We have got a couple I just want to run past you. First one is from Dean, so thanks, Dean, for that. And Dean just says that he, I guess, was on our Internet of Things webinar a few weeks back and was interested. So thanks, Dean, for watching that as well. And he's asking about using DataServe for handling reporting control of, generally IoT devices as well as data center assets. So I think he's basically saying, again, is this yet another use of DataServe looking specifically at cooling in data centers, or not just cooling, obviously, although it's immersion cooling, but obviously could look at air cooled systems as well, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, you can consider it really as just being another string to IoT's bow. Your immersion calling tech is, you can kind of just see it as another Internet of Things device, really. So yeah, if you've got data serve set up and you've got your building management systems feeding data into it, you've got, looking at IT service management information, whatever you're doing around that, you can also have a look at this information within the same dashboard. And as we said earlier, where you've got that notification bell that people can subscribe to, you can really sort of make it your own. So where Dean might be interested in everything IoT, including immersion tech, his colleague, down the way might only be interested in the immersion cooling tech side of things. You can really customize your experience. So you can see everything or just some parts of it.
Great, thank you very much. If there are any more questions, by the way, obviously into the last few minutes, then please fire them over. The next question is from Gammon Sin, and he asks, she asks, now I think I may have missed what you said earlier, but you might just want to recap on this one, Matt, about training the AI models. So again, confirm getting the historical data. Where'd you get that from? And he also asks, she also asks about how long does it take on average to, for example, get a high level of accuracy. Is that a big job, or can it happen fairly quickly depending on the data you feed in?
Yeah. So in terms of where we get the data from, so that's either pushed to data serve from whatever device. That could be every second, every 10 seconds, every minute, however it is. The API is sitting there ready to get that data sent to it, and it'll update its configuration item in CMDB. Essentially as quickly as the data is sent to it. Or as I said earlier, maybe you're keeping that data in a separate database. We can actually go off and poll that database. So it's sort of bi-directional. So in terms of training it, you don't need that much data really. Like a few hundred data points that sort of really do say this is what bad looks like, as I said earlier. Training that is normally couple of milliseconds. It's a very, very quick, because actually the data itself is very small. If you've got 1,000 temperature readings or 1,000 RPM values to do with a fan or a pump, very, very quick to train on that information, because actually the data volumes are tiny if you were to add it all up. Obviously the more data the better, and actually it's not necessarily more data about a failure that's better. It's actually sometimes more about the more failures, the better. You might have a pump that might fail one of 10 different ways. So it's really good to have all 10 represented in the model, but that's not always possible. And that's where the confidence actually comes into it. So it might not be, of course, that something's going to fail and it's going to match your model exactly. That's where AI and confidence comes into it, and that's where your thresholds come into it as well. So you may say, for example, we're only going to bother people if it's above an 80% confidence against this particular AI model.
Okay, great, thanks very much. And last question we have at the moment, it's actually two parts to this one. This is from Dr. Kerry, who says, interested in scalability, where you've got a large estate, and I'll sort of bring in what was said a little bit earlier around from Dean around the IoT side of it. Can the system scale? Can it handle large scale feeds, obviously, and outputs into a meaningful model? And then the second part, which is around does AIM own the IP on data? So first point is around scalability, Matt.
Yeah, so we use all the latest technologies when it comes to sort of hosting and modern software design. So essentially what that means, without getting too techie about it, is we can spin up multiple APIs whenever we need them. So you might have one device sending its telemetry data to it to data serve every second. Essentially, if you suddenly then the next day turn on 1,000 devices sending that information to data serve, what it can do is as soon as it needs more compute, essentially, it can automatically spin up new APIs so that it can serve all of those requests, without having any sort of slowdowns in the system. So that's how it can scale in terms of how the software is actually being built. And then in terms of like the user interface and user experience, I'd probably sort of talk about what we spoke about earlier around the fact that you are able to subscribe to what you're interested in. So you sort of don't get necessarily overfaced with data. That can be a bit daunting sometimes if suddenly you've got 1,000 devices and it's telemetry information being sent to you. So people can customize their experience in a highly scalable situation. And then the other bit, Steve, was about the IP
ownership.
Yeah. So I like to talk about how most of the time, or not most of the time, but sometimes when people, when organisations scale, they will buy another organisation, and then that's how they sort of own that piece of software. We didn't do that. We actually started off with a completely blank slate. It was around four or 5 years ago. So AIM has been going for around 15 years or so. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, we started seriously getting involved as a software house in developing these types of software. So yeah, we built it all from the ground up, and we own the IP 100%.
Great, thank you. All the questions are now being fielded. So just to say thank you, Matt, for giving us a good overview of how DataServe could be working for an organisation. Could be working for an organisation involved in these new calling technologies. And I'd like to thank everybody who did attend today. Thanks again for your time. Just to say again that you'll be receiving a link through to the recording after the event, and you can watch this on demand. Please feel free to subscribe to us and see what other content we're actually publishing on our channel. It's always good and interesting information, I'm sure, for you to take a look at. Other than that, I'd like again just to say final thanks, and rest of the day, have a good one, and look forward to hopefully seeing you on another webinar soon. Thank you very much, and good day.